Hello, this is Gary Marr of Arizona State University. This screen capture is from my IFT 101 class. In the screen capture, I'm going to talk about processing sequential files. We're going to do both a read and a write operation. For this particular example, there's three files you're going to have to find in Canvas in the modules resources. One's called team example, that's the Python file. And then also it's going to use as input or read only that team data file. And actually the last file, the new data.txt, all three of which are shown up here in the tab, will appear when the program is complete. Now what you can do with most IDEs, even though it's looking for Python files, it will let you view and process text files and files as long as it's an ASCII file that it can read in. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, but I've got all three files up here in tabs. Here's my input file, which I've associated with a variable identifier called myFile. It's opening this file as read access. It's going to actually also open a file called newteam.txt for write access. And you're going to find those letter codes are important because R will just simply read the file, not change it. W will write out a new file. And there's also a code called A, which will append to an existing file. Now what's happening in this particular application is I'm going to keep on overwriting that new file. If I wanted to add to it on each run, then I'd put an A there for append. And there's different letter combinations. It's pretty self-explanatory from the options. I would go on the internet and you can look at any one of the Python tutorials and you'll find out some of the combinations there. We're only going to look at read and write in this particular example. I'm going to create a couple counters. Oh, before I do the counters, the actual team data file looks like this in Thonny, but you have to be careful because since it's an ASCII file, some characters are invisible. And also, depending on what type font you use, certain editors, if you use a proportional spacing on the font size, it can kind of mess you up in terms of character positions. But the way this program is going to work is it's going to basically take the first 19 characters and use that for the team name, and the next 10 characters, I believe it is, I'll have to check in a second, and use that for the city name. And what ends up happening is you don't see invisible characters with this editor. You'd have to use something like Notepad++, and then turn on all characters, and you would see that there's two invisible characters at the end of each line. It's a line feed carriage return. And that's true of all ASCII text files. That's the way it's done, and I have to count for that when I actually process these records. So there's my input records. These are the records I'm going to create. I've got a counter I'm setting, and I've got a team value I'm setting. I'm not sure what I'm using the team value for. I may not be using it for this. It might have been for test. So let's say for now, let me comment this out. That way I don't lose it, but I'm not going to use it this run. It's going to use a loop to read through that a variable called, oh, there it is right there. That's why I need team. A variable called team. And basically what it's going to say is, as long as team is not empty, okay, the word starts off as 1, it's going to process the loop. So what this is, it's a set no value so that it ends up being true on the while pretest. So since it's a 1, it comes in the loop. It reads the first 19 characters, puts that in a variable called team, reads the next 10 characters, puts that in a variable called city, reads the last character in a variable called x. Now, as I told you, the first record had a field of 19 characters, the second field was 10, but I have to count for that line feed carriage return, so I'm going to put a single byte at the end. If I don't do that, it's going to cause the information in the variable to kind of climb. So I'd rather having a nice even demarcation between the team name and the city. It starts to climb over to the next field, and I get kind of gobbledygook. You can kind of see part of the information, but it's not going to output correctly because it won't be in the variables correctly. And so if you want to see what the effect that would do, simply comment this slide out, run it, and you'll see what the consequences of that are. Now, as long as my team is not empty, so on the first pass it's going to read this record, it's going to have a value. I'm going to output the record number, which is simply the counter, the team name and the team city. I'm going to build a new variable called new data, which is going to concatenate city, an empty space, and then team. And I'm going to write that data in a new file called newteam.txt that was pointed to the variable called myFileOut. MyFileOut.write, that writes the data out. It hits the counter, comes back up here. Team has a value in it because it just read the first one, which I think was the New York team. And it'll continue until it has no more teams to read. And then one of the important things you always want to do with any file processing is you want at the end of the program to close those files out. It's not as much of a problem now, I don't think, as it used to be, but in the old days when DOS was the only option you had on a PC, you had a certain number of files that could be opened at one time. And so if you didn't clean up after you were done with a file, you could actually run out of files and cause other programs to error. So it's a good idea to always clean up after you're done and close the file out. When I run this, let's run it now, it'll give me, let's see. No, I just edited something outside of Thonys. That's why it doesn't like it. But looks like the output is fine. Record number 1 is Yankees. City is New York. Let's check out my data. Yankees, New York. That's all cool. Looks like I then moved to Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles, and then finally the Diamondbacks. And that looks like it's read okay. This is what the file would look like when it wrote out. It's going to go down a little bit here. I decided not to put line feed character returns after each record. I could certainly make it list out the same way as it came in with some additional concatenation on the output string. Back to the program. And then after that, after the closure, the program ends. Hopefully that helps. That's one example of some file processing. And if you have any questions, post them to the discussion board or send me an email in Canvas. Thank you.